Turuan din natin ang mga bata ng tamang paghugas ng mga kamay. Basain ang kamay ng tubig at lagyan ng sabon. Kuskusin ang iyong mga palad. Gayon din ang pagitan ng mga daliri. Pati na ang likod ng mga palad at daliri. Ganon din ang iyong hinlalaki, kasama ang mga dulo ng iyong mga daliri. Pagkatapos ay iyong kalapulsuhan. Gawin ito ng kahit 20 segundo. Pagkatapos ay banlawan ng tubig at patuyuin.
We know that this is a scary time for all of us.
The coronavirus is changing the world.
Changing our lives.
So please, take care of yourself.
Keep your distance.
Wash your hands.
And if you can, stay at home.
We at DW
Are here for you.
we are working tirelessly to keep you informed on all of our platforms.
We're all in this together.
And together,
We'll make it through.
Stay safe, everybody.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Please, stay safe.
I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic. And as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. And now to the news. More than 12 million coronavirus infections have now been recorded across the world. Over half in the United States and Latin America, according to an AP tally of official sources at 09:55 GMT on Thursday. Take a look. At least 12,063,425 cases and 549,451 deaths have been recorded, with the number of infections doubling since May 31. About half of those who caught the virus have recovered, with 3,055,101 cases and 132,309 deaths. The United States is the worst hit country, with Brazil second, having registered 1,713,160 cases and 67,964 deaths. The tallies probably reflect only a fraction of the number of infections, as many countries test only the most serious cases. And in many places around the world, the coronavirus is spreading out of control. The numbers just keep going up and up. And the United States recorded 55,000 new coronavirus cases in just 24 hours on Wednesday, according to a tally by Johns Hopkins University, bringing its total to more than 3 million recorded infections since the pandemic. Now, Wednesday morning, President Trump called on schools throughout the country to reopen in the fall. Meanwhile, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease doctor, joined Senator Doug Jones to talk about how to reopen safely even as the virus seems to fight back. Take a look.
Schools, we want to reopen the schools. Everybody wants it. The moms want it, the dads want it, the kids want it. It's time to do it. You know, our mortality rate is right now at a level that people don't talk about, but it's down tenfold. So you look at deaths are way down from this horrible China virus, and more cases. Because we're doing more testing, we have more cases. If we did half the testing, we'd have far fewer cases.
When you look at what's happened in other parts of the world, where there was a peak of infection and then a return back down to baseline, unfortunately for us in the United States, being a large country, a heterogeneous country with different levels of outbreak throughout different regions, states, cities, counties, we have peaked at a high level and stayed at about 20,000 cases per day for months until just recently, about a couple of weeks ago, when we tried to start opening in certain of the states, and as the senator said very appropriately, sometimes a bit too soon, sometimes jumping over some of the checkpoints. We now have a resurgence where we've gone up as high as 57,000 cases, which is almost double what it was at our so-called high baseline. So we have a situation right now that we've got to proceed to continue to try and open, but in a safe, measured, very prudent manner. And I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions about that, because I don't think it should be all or none, either shut down completely or throw caution to the wind. If we're going to open up safely for the economy and for employment, we need to do it in a way that's well thought out and cautious, but nonetheless continue to proceed.
The United States, the hardest hit in the world, had earlier Wednesday passed the grim milestone of 3 million infections. The actual number is likely far higher due to issues over getting tested in March and April. The U.S. also added an additional 833 virus deaths, bringing the death toll to 132,195, according to the Baltimore-based institution. This was shown at 8:30 p.m. GMT Thursday. U.S. President Donald Trump regularly downplays the numbers, attributing them to an increase in testing capacity during the month of June. Coronavirus cases are surging in several southern hotspots, including Texas, Florida, Louisiana, and Arizona. But the pandemic has almost entirely receded from its former epicenter in New York and the Northeast. Several states have been forced to suspend their reopening processes or even reverse course, with some ordering bars to close again. Even as cases surge in dozens of states, the U.S. has seen a lower death rate. But Dr. Fauci warned against a false sense of security. Take a look.
That it's a false narrative to take comfort in a lower rate of death. There's so many other things that are very dangerous and bad about this virus. Don't get yourself into false complacency.
Dr. Fauci's comments came at an event Tuesday with Senator Doug Jones, a Democrat of Alabama. Some states that had hoped to be getting back to normal by now have instead been forced to reinstate restrictions and issue mandatory mask orders. Meanwhile, Dr. Anthony Fauci explained on whether there's evidence that the coronavirus can transmit through airborne spread. He warned that it should not be ruled out. Take a look.
Yes, it's referred to as aerosolized, or sometimes referred to as airborne, which means as opposed to a respiratory droplet, or if I cough or sneeze or even speak, you can get thin droplets that go out for a certain number of feet, usually 3 or 4 feet, and then they go to the ground. And that's the reason why we talk about the 6-foot distance. When you talk about aerosol or airborne, there have been demonstrations of viruses that can actually stay in the air for much longer and hence get caught up in the circulation system of a given room. There isn't a lot of definitive evidence about what the impact of the aerosolization is on COVID expression. However, we have some good examples back with SARS, which is a similar virus, where there were clear-cut examples of spread by aerosol. So although we don't think it's a major issue of spread, it's something that we can't completely rule out, which is a reason, Senator, why we insist that people wear masks, because that will protect you against that. This I have here is a cloth mask that clearly would protect me. So if you say it doesn't matter whether you put it on or take it off, you're giving a wrong mixed signal. The signal should be wear a mask, period. It's certainly not commonly. It is spread by the respiratory route. When people are close to each other, and I think what we need to emphasize today is something that we have to say over and over again. You should not think that the only way that you can get the infection is if someone coughs on you or sneezes on you. That's not necessarily the case. That certainly is one way in which it is transmitted. But another way is about 20 to 40% of the people who are infected have no symptoms at all. So you may be standing next to someone, and this is the reason, as the senator just said about masks, you could be standing next to someone who looks and feels perfectly well, who is infected, who is not coughing and not sneezing, but merely speaking to you. Because we now know from experiments using laser lights and various refractions, where when people merely speak, you can see very small micro droplets go out. So if you're within 6 feet of someone who is infected, even though they're without symptoms, there is a possibility that that person can transmit it to you or you to another person.
In Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro posted a video of himself taking the controversial drug hydroxychloroquine. He said he knows that there are other remedies to treat the illness, but that none have been proven to be scientifically effective, and saying that he trusts that hydroxychloroquine works for him. Its effectiveness in fighting COVID-19 is the subject of much debate. A string of studies in the UK and US, as well as by the World Health Organization, have found it ineffective and sometimes deadly because of its effects on the heart. Several studies were cancelled early because of that. And going back to Dr. Fauci, he said that he was strongly in favor of mandating mask use. Again, speaking on a Facebook event with U.S. Senator Doug Jones, Dr. Fauci said ordinances requiring mask use sends a clear message about its importance in containing the outbreak. Take a look.
Actually, any covering, for sure, is better than no covering. The best one is the one you don't want to use because it really should be saved for the healthcare worker, and that's the N95. But the surgical masks that we have, the plain old cotton ones, the paper ones, they work fine. The cloth masks we found also work in many respects as good as that. If you can home make a cloth mask that really is the same as you see with the ones that are made by companies, they're fine. I wear a cloth mask. Some of you may have seen at the hearing that I was at, I wore a cloth mask that said my favorite team, the Washington National Baseball Team, but that was a cloth mask. Okay, I do believe a statewide mask order is important because there is a variability in people taking seriously or even understanding the benefit of masks. Masks make a difference. It is one of the primary fundamental tools that we have particularly as you mentioned in the question, because a considerable number of individuals, up to 40%, do not have any symptoms, and yet they still can transmit the infection. And for that reason, we should all be wearing masks when we're out in public, particularly when we can't negotiate the distance between ourselves and others in public.
Meanwhile, millions in Australia's second biggest city, Melbourne, went into lockdown to battle another coronavirus outbreak as spikes across the world added to the devastation already wrought by the pandemic. Let's listen to some reactions.
It's a very good thing that Victorian government has taken this measure, because everybody has to be aware of what their rights and what they have to be in this critical situation. And we are going through with our normal life and giving a bit of a dedication to the right thing.
We were isolating intensely last time. My dad is elderly, so we've been doing masks and hand sanitizer and not leaving the house as much as possible.
Now, residents have been told to stay at home for 6 weeks after other measures to contain a spike in COVID-19 failed to prevent the virus from spreading. The state of Victoria, which announced a further 165 new cases on Thursday, has been effectively sealed off in an effort to preserve the rest of Australia's success in curbing the virus. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian said 2 cases of COVID-19 had been identified in the border town of Albury, and she warned against travel to or from communities on the state frontier. Shoppers in Victoria State, of which Melbourne is the capital, stripped shelves bare on Wednesday before the lockdown began, and the country's largest supermarket chain said it had reimposed buying limits on items including pasta, vegetables, and sugar. In Melbourne, there are concerns over the economic and mental health impacts of the second lockdown, which officials estimate will cost the economy $6 billion Australian dollars. In the United Kingdom, the government has outlined plans to save jobs. Joining us live from the United Kingdom is Graham Thomas. Hello, Graham.
Good afternoon, good evening. Alma, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. So your updates for us, Graham?
Yeah, indeed, the UK government has unveiled a package worth some £30 billion or $37 billion to save jobs and help the young into work to kickstart the coronavirus hit economy. Finance Minister Rishi Sunak's measures were announced on Wednesday as he delivered a mini budget to Parliament. Let's listen in.
So today, we're introducing a new policy to reward and incentivise employers who successfully bring furloughed staff back. A new jobs retention bonus. If you're an employer and you bring someone back who was furloughed and you continuously employ them through to January, we will pay you a £1,000 bonus per employee. The Kickstart scheme will directly pay employers to create new jobs for any 16 to 24-year-old at risk of long-term unemployment. These will be new jobs, with the funding conditional on the firm proving these jobs are additional. These will be decent jobs, with a minimum of 25 hours per week paid at least the national minimum wage, and they will be good quality jobs, with employers providing Kickstarters with training and support to find a permanent job. I have decided today to cut stamp duty. Right now, there is no stamp duty on transactions below £125,000. Today, I am increasing the threshold to £500,000. This will be a temporary cut running until the 31st of March next year. Meals eaten at any participating business, Monday to Wednesday, will be 50% off up to a maximum discount of £10 per head for everyone, including children.
Finance Minister Rishi Sunak also expressed that although hardship lies ahead, no one will be left without hope. Other measures that we've seen include a temporary cut to the level of value-added tax on food accommodation and attractions, and lifting the threshold at which stamp duty is due on home purchases, thus to help the construction sector. Britain has suffered Europe's deadliest outbreak of COVID-19, and a nationwide shutdown led to the worst economic contraction among the G7 leading industrial states. Sunak said the UK economy had contracted by 25% over the coronavirus lockdown, the same amount it grew in the previous 18 years. The Chancellor also confirmed £3 billion of green investment after British Prime Minister Boris Johnson vowed to build, build and build our way out of the economic crisis. The investment package includes £2 billion in grants for households to insulate homes and make them more energy efficient, and another £1 billion for public sector buildings, including hospitals. The plan is also part of Britain's long-term pledge to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2050 to tackle the climate change. Britain imposed a national lockdown on March 23 to halt the spread of COVID-19, but has gradually begun easing restrictions in the hope of boosting ailing businesses. Recent official data showed that the UK's biggest quarterly contraction for more than 40 years at minus 2.2% in the period January to March this year. However, the data also only included the first full week of the lockdown, and economists expect subsequent damage to be considerably worse for the second quarter. Another contraction would technically place Britain into a recession. So since the crisis began, the Bank of England has pumped cash stimulus worth £300 billion into Britain's virus-hit economy and slashed its main interest rate to a record low of 0.1%. Moves all aimed at propping up businesses and saving jobs. Experts estimate the total cost of state emergency measures, meanwhile, could run as high as £300 billion. Back to you, Alma.
Graham, what will these measures mean for the ordinary person or man on the street?
Alma, the Chancellor made a host of changes to the economy in a bid to stave off a post-coronavirus decline, and was aimed at breathing life into an economy battered by job losses in recent days and weeks. So for anyone who has been on furlough, if the company keeps you on board in a job paying at least £525 a month, then the government will give a furlough grant in January of £1,000 to try and make sure that people on furlough are coming off it and staying in jobs. This is to incentivize employers to do so, which will be of some comfort to those who feel insecure in their jobs at the moment, as employers may see this a way of keeping employees on the payroll. However, only this lunchtime, we heard of 4,000 jobs going at one of our largest pharmaceutical companies, Boots, which equates to around 7% of their workforce here in the UK. We also heard that in England and Northern Ireland, stamp duty will not be paid until the end of March 2021 on homes worth up to £500,000 or 630,000 US dollars. And this is a huge change, as previously you started paying stamp duty at just £125,000 or 158,000 US dollars, unless you were a first-time buyer. So to put this in context, for someone buying a £500,000 house, that's £15,000 or 19,000 US dollars less that you would have to pay. Another great incentive for the general public was his announcement that if you go to a restaurant between Monday and Wednesday in August, then up to £10 per person will be supplied by the government against the bill. This will be a great incentive to the general public to soak up the hospitality industry, which has been one of the hardest hit from the lockdown. Back to you, Alma.
All right, thank you very much. Just an added touch to your report there, Chancellor Sunak also announced a novel plan for an eat out to help out discount of 50% on meals in cafes and restaurants for this August. Just an added info for you. Anyways, thank you so much, Graham, for your time, and you do take care. And we look forward to hearing more news from the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Graham Thomas reporting for EBC in the United Kingdom, and we live in interesting times.
Eagle News, we'll be right back. Stay tuned. The coronavirus is also taking an ever-increasing toll across the Middle East. Iran has reported a record one-day coronavirus death toll of 221. Iran has been battling the Middle East's deadliest outbreak of the virus since late February. Iran closed schools, canceled public events, and banned movement between its 31 provinces in March, but the government progressively lifted restrictions from April to try to reopen its sanctions-hit economy. Ali Reza Zali, the head of the city's virus task force, said that Tehran needs more restrictive measures to contain the virus and will discuss their re-imposition in an emergency meeting with the health minister. His deputy, Ali Maher, told ISNA that measures may be reintroduced as soon as Saturday. Some red provinces have already reimposed restrictions in recent weeks after receiving a green light from the government. Israel, meanwhile, is reimposing strict limitations, closing down clubs, bars, and more as coronavirus cases surge across that country. Meanwhile, a top Israeli health official resigned, saying her guidance on combating the coronavirus was being disregarded and that the country's containment efforts were disoriented as it faced a surging caseload. The resignation of Sigal Sadetsky, the health ministry's director of public health services, came after Israel reimposed several lockdown measures in an effort to curb the virus spread. Sadetsky said Israel's effective initial response had been nullified by the swift and broad opening of the economy. In recent days, Israel has had record high numbers of around 1,000 daily infections, nearly twice the peak seen in the spring, with serious cases doubling about every 4 days, according to the Health Ministry. The country currently has at least 12,700 active cases, with 35 patients on ventilators. At least 338 have died. Prime Minister Netanyahu, who thanked Zadetsky for her service, has warned that Israel's health system risks being paralyzed by a flood of seriously ill COVID-19 patients. But he has also voiced concern about renewed lockdown measures that would further devastate an already battered economy. In other parts of the world where there had been some success against the virus, citizens have chafed under renewed restrictions to counter fresh waves of the disease. Many have accused their governments of mismanaging COVID-19 responses, and Serbia saw anger spill over into street violence. Its capital, Belgrade, was hit by clashes for a second night as police skirmished with outraged demonstrators. Clouds of tear gas and smoke filled the city center in chaotic scenes that mirrored violence the night before, when thousands came out to protest the return of a round-the-clock weekend lockdown. Now, critics have accused the powerful president of inviting a second wave of coronavirus infections by rapidly lifting the initial lockdown. The 50-year-old president, Alexander Vučić, branded the protesters as fascists and said there were suspicions of meddling of foreign intelligence. In Japan, a mother was arrested after her 3-year-old daughter died after a week on her own in the house. Joining us live from Japan is Dennis Liu. Hello, Dennis.
Hello, Alma. Good evening.
Good evening,
Yes,
Dennis.
here in Tokyo, a woman was arrested Tuesday. Good evening, Alma.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Can you hear me, Alma?
Good evening.
Yes. Here in Tokyo, a woman... Hello?
Hi, I can hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yes. Here in Tokyo, a woman was arrested today after starving her 3-year-old daughter to death, according to police. The mother of the little girl, Saki Kakehashi, 24, admitted that she neglected her daughter, Noah, when she left home for more than a week, leaving her daughter alone unattended. In the autopsy conducted showed that Noah died from severe hunger and dehydration. According to investigators, Kakehashi was suspected to have left her daughter sometime in June while visiting her boyfriend in Kagoshima Prefecture. Kakehashi explained that she didn't expect Noah to die, and she expected she would be all right to live alone in their apartment in Tokyo, where they had been staying together since 2017 after her divorce. Also, according to the child care facility, the little Noah, the victim, had already stopped attending daycare more than a year ago. In another report, Tokyo Metropolitan Government said 224 new cases of the coronavirus were confirmed today, Thursday, the highest ever daily total since April 17th, where 206 cases were confirmed. But the number of new cases in the city had been lower than 100 on Wednesday for the first time in the past week. That is the latest for now. The total number of infections in Tokyo is already 7,272. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Dennis, for your time and for that update in Japan. Please do take care and stay safe.
Thank you very much. Reporting live from Tokyo, Japan, this is Dennis Liu. We live in interesting times.
Japanese emergency services and troops scramble to reach people cut off by catastrophic flooding and landslides that have killed dozens and caused widespread damage, with more torrential rain forecast. In the scenic tourist area of Gifu in central Japan, officials said landslides and floodwater had left just nearly 1,000 households stranded, or around 2,000 300 people. The rain front started in the southwest early Saturday and has since cut a swath of destruction across Japan, dumping record amounts of rain and causing swollen rivers to burst their banks. Japan's meteorological agency said heavy rain will likely continue until at least July 12, calling for extreme vigilance for possible landslides and flooding in low-lying areas. The JMA also issued its second highest evacuation order to around 350,000 people. Such orders are not compulsory, however, and most residents are choosing not to go to shelters, possibly due to coronavirus fears. The death toll has climbed gradually as more victims are discovered in isolated areas. Government spokesman Yoshihide Suga told reporters that 58 people were now confirmed dead. He said authorities were investigating whether 4 other deaths were linked to the floods, adding that 17 people were unaccounted for. After 5 days, blocked by floodwater and landslides, troops finally managed to rescue some 40 residents from Ashikita village in Kumamoto region. But in the hardest hit region of Kumamoto, attention was turning to cleanup operations after some of the heaviest rain for years. Complicating the rescue efforts, the coronavirus pandemic has claimed nearly 1,000 lives in Japan from more than 20,000 cases, and the need to maintain social distancing has reduced capacity at shelters, and many have preferred to take refuge in their vehicles for fear of becoming infected. Regional authorities have asked potential volunteers from outside Kumamoto not to travel to the region for fear of spreading the virus. Japan is in the middle of its annual rainy season and often sees damaging floods and landslides during this period that lasts several weeks. However, experts say climate change is intensifying the phenomenon because a warmer atmosphere holds more water to dump in the form of rain. The Gauteng Department of Health prepares a mass burial site for expected COVID-19 fatalities at the Honingnens Krans Cemetery in Pretoria, one of South Africa's coronavirus hotspots. Take a look. COVID-19 infections in Africa have surpassed 500,000, according to the World Health Organization, and there are concerns that a growing number of countries are seeing a sharp rise in infection. To date, the virus has claimed almost 12,000 lives on the continent, more than those who died in the world's worst Ebola outbreak in West Africa, which ended in 2016. Algeria, Egypt, Ghana, Nigeria, and South Africa account for about 71% of COVID-19 cases, while South Africa alone accounts for 43%. In a statement, WHO Director for Africa, Dr. Matshidiso Moeti said that more than a third of countries in Africa have seen infections double in the past month, increasing the threat of COVID-19, overwhelming fragile health systems. Now, she called on countries to continue to strengthen key public health measures such as testing, tracing contacts, and isolating cases in a bid to slow down the spread of the virus to a manageable level. Eagle News will be right back. Welcome back. John Lewis said it did not plan to reopen 8 stores shut during Britain's lockdown, affecting 1,300 jobs. The company, whose physical stores were already struggling before the coronavirus outbreak, as shoppers increasingly switched to online purchases, said it expected to sell the majority of its goods through the internet this year and next. Prior to the pandemic, the 8 shops identified were already financially challenged, and the pandemic has accelerated the switch from shopping in-store to online, according to John Lewis in a statement. Now, among the 8 shops shutting permanently is a department store in England's second biggest city, Birmingham, and a much smaller outlet at London's Heathrow Airport. John Lewis forms part of the John Lewis Partnership, comprising also the upmarket Waitrose supermarkets. Meanwhile, UK pharmacy giant Boots said it will cut more than 4,000 jobs after the coronavirus pandemic slashed sales. U.S.-owned Boots said it planned a significant restructuring across its head office, store, teams, and opticians, resulting in a reduction of its headcount of more than 4,000 and the closure of 48 Boots opticians stores. To other news now, Australia offered pathways to permanent residency for thousands of people from Hong Kong in response to China's crackdown on dissent, drawing a furious reply from Beijing. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said his government was suspending its extradition agreement with the city, and in addition to extending the visas of 10,000 Hong Kongers already in the country, threw open the door to thousands more wanting to start a new life down under.
What we've agreed to do is we've agreed to adjust the policy settings to ensure that for skilled and graduate visa holders, we will be extending visas by 5 years from today, with a pathway to permanent residency at the end of those 5 years. Now, that means if you're a current or future student, you will be able to stay for a total of 5 years once you've graduated, with a pathway to permanent residency at the end of that period.
Prime Minister Morrison said the decisions were taken in response to China's imposition last week of a tough new security law in Hong Kong, which he said constitutes a fundamental change of circumstances for the semi-autonomous territory. Australian Foreign Minister Marise Payne said China's moves in Hong Kong were discussed earlier Thursday with Australia's so-called Five Eyes security partners: New Zealand, the United States, Britain, and Canada. The new law, which followed sometimes violent pro-democracy protests, is the most radical change in Hong Kong's freedoms since Britain handed the city back to China in 1997, under an agreement designed to preserve its way of life for 50 years. Beijing in recent months has imposed tariffs on some Australian imports and impeded trade in other key commodities in response to Australian steps to counter Chinese interference in the country. China, Australia's biggest trade partner and a competitor for influence in the Pacific, was notably infuriated when Canberra led calls for a probe into the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. New Zealand is also reviewing its relationship with Hong Kong because of the new law, Foreign Minister Winston Peters said on Thursday, including extradition arrangements, controls on exports of strategic goods, and travel advice. Canada has also suspended its extradition treaty with Hong Kong, while the British government has offered more than 3 million Hong Kongers a broader path to citizenship. Meanwhile, China slammed the Australian decision to offer safe haven to thousands of Hong Kong citizens and suspend the extradition pact with the city as gross interference in its affairs. Take a look.
澳方有关言论和所宣布的举措，严重违反国际法和国际关系基本准则，粗暴干涉中国内政。中方不吃这一套，对此表示强烈谴责，并保留进一步作出反应的权利。由此造成的一切后果，将完全由澳方承担。
And as mentioned earlier, Australia did suspend its extradition agreement with Hong Kong in response to China's imposition of a new national security law in the territory. Let's listen in.
We have agreed to announce that that national security law constitutes a fundamental change of circumstances in respect to our extradition agreement with Hong Kong. And so Australia today has taken steps to suspend our extradition agreement. We have formally notified Hong Kong and advised the Chinese authorities. Well, our decision to suspend the extradition agreement with Hong Kong represents an acknowledgement of the fundamental change of circumstances in relation to Hong Kong because of the new security law, which in our view, and this is not just our view, this is, I'd say, a shared view of many countries, it undermines the one country, two systems framework and Hong Kong's own basic law and the high degree of autonomy guaranteed in the Sino-British Joint Declaration.
Okay, meanwhile, this just in, the mayor of Seoul, South Korea, is missing. And authorities are now searching for the mayor of South Korea's capital, who vanished amid sexual harassment allegations after giving his daughter a message that she described as sounding like a will. Now, police said they were looking for Mayor Park Won-soon near a small hill in Seoul's Sangbuk neighborhood, where his cell phone signal was last detected. And they said the phone was currently turned off. His daughter had called the police this afternoon, and said her father had given her a will-like verbal message before leaving their home about 5 hours earlier. And the daughter didn't explain the contents of the message. According to the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency, about 700 officers, 3 drones, and 4 police dogs were mobilized in the search for the mayor, according to police. And we will be following this story, this developing story, as we get more updates. Olympic boxing hopeful Arisa Tsubata is used to taking a hit in the ring, but it's during her work as a nurse that she faces her toughest opponent, coronavirus. Now, the 27-year-old juggles a brutal training regime in boxing gloves with long, irregular hours in surgical gloves at a hospital near Tokyo. Take a look.
So それは医療現場ではかからないリスクはないので、かかるかもしれないっていうのは常に頭に置いて働かないといけなかったので、それはやっぱまあ私もですけど、みんなストレスを抱えながら働いていったと思います。で1年延期ってなって、私の中ではまた自分の練習する時間が増えたって思って、結構私自身で考えたらプラスになることだなと思ったんですけど、ただ理由だったので、感染症の流行ってことだったので、その喜んでいいのか悪いのかちょっと複雑な気持ちでした。
Boston Dynamics Spot and SoftBank Robotics Pepper Robots collaboratively danced to cheer for the Japanese baseball team Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks before their Nippon Professional Baseball or MPB game against Rakuten Eagles, as no spectators are allowed in the stadium due to COVID-19. Take a look. With their stadium devoid of supporters due to coronavirus restrictions, the Japanese baseball team, Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks, brought in replacement fans, these dancing robots. And before their most recent Nippon Professional Baseball game against Rakuten Eagles on July 7, more than 20 robots, some resembling humans and others on four legs like a dog, danced to the team's fight song in the otherwise empty stand. And before we close, we leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.